Awesome, Franco. It's great to have you here. It's been quite the journey. I think the last time that we did anything like this presentation was at the Human Garage. I think it was 2016, maybe?
17.
Early 17, yeah. And we did the first presentation on the Power Kirk and on the Kitoba. And it was a really scientific presentation. And today what we're going to do is we're going to pick your brain and ask some questions about this technology you've created. And it is technology. It's not just a supplement. And we want to get to know a little bit more about it and about you. I'd like you to hear the story. I mean, I know it. I've heard it a couple of times myself. But I'd love to hear the story again for the audience. Specifically, how this all came about. Like, you were a bodybuilder, and you ran into a problem, and that's what started this whole journey off, right?
That's correct, yeah.
So tell us a little bit.
You want to know the story?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, it started, so I was doing my undergrad at the University of British Columbia in human nutrition while I was climbing the ladder in the bodybuilding arena. And I was using the laboratories. I had latitude to be able to analyze blood work and determine exactly what was working for me, what wasn't working for me as I progressed towards each contest. So every contest for me was an experimental program that was tangibly analyzed from the standpoint of blood work from month to month as I progressed towards it. So it was very scientific. And I really leaned a lot on curcumin as an anti-inflammatory. At the time, believe it or not, curcumin was relatively unknown. And I was one of the first in Canada in the late 80s to be using it the way I was. And I was using large quantities. The idea was to deliver an anti-inflammatory effect to my body because I was training so hard that I wanted to be able to train more frequently than my competitor that I would see every 2 years, competitors in these bodybuilding shows. So I had assigned myself a 2-year cycle. Most people competed, every 6 months, every year. And I figured that, if you compete too frequently, you know how devastating it is on the body to get ready for a contest. It's just, it's denigrating. So I just began to map out the 2-year cycle and trained hard and delivered whatever supplements I needed to be able to recover as quickly as I could. Curcumin became a staple for me. It worked well. And I had other things I was using as a program that delivered results that were, for most people, that thought it was formidable. I went from Mr. Junior BC as a 19-year-old. First contest I lost, first contest I went into, and then kind of things started coming together based on the analytical work. And I won Mr. BC Senior, Men's, Mr. Vancouver, Mr. Western Canada, Mr. Canada, and then went to Los Angeles and won the IFBB Weider Pro Qualifier. And so the whole time I was an underdog, and I was at the same time doing my undergrad, and I began to collect the data. And after winning the contest, I had actually graduated with my undergrad. But I'm going to step back 1 year before winning that contest, because it sounds like everything went smoothly. And as you know, as you progress, the best laid plans don't necessarily go the way you want them to go. And I was supposed to compete in Mr. North America contest in '91 and became very ill, and I was hospitalized, and I was bleeding. So at the time, nobody knew what it was. I had this gastrointestinal problem that would raise its ugly head every time I had exams in university. And I thought, well, maybe I'm just, pretty weak at dealing with environmental and life stress. And that was, something that was delivered to me. But eventually it just got worse and worse until preparing for the Mr. North America, which compounded life with more stress, physical and mental. And I ended up being hospitalized, bleeding. I was in there for 4 weeks. And I weighed at the time about 220 pounds, like just massive, like twice the size I am today.
How tall are you?
That's a big guy.
Yeah, I'm 5'7". I was 225. If you think about, like my legs are like 33 inches and my waist is 28. Arms almost 19 inches, chest 52. Like I was massive. And in 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, I'd lost 25 pounds in the hospital, bleeding. Every time I go to the washroom, just piles of blood, and nobody knew what it was. The disease was resistant to any of the corticosteroids that they were delivering, and it turned into a little bit of a nightmare. But I realized at the time, you've got to really, and this is a philosophy today that you're all focused on, you've got to really take care of yourself and really look deep at what's working for you and what's not working for you and what used to work for you and what's changed today to cause whatever is ailing you at the moment. And that's what I did. And in fact, what had happened was for 4 months prior to this adverse event, I had stopped taking the curcumin I was using. Now, this is so early on in the natural health space, because I was in the natural health space advising and counseling people based on my education and personal experience in sports nutrition. But so early on that turmeric and curcumin were never really available all the time, reliably. And there was a world shortage. But I said, okay, you know what? World shortage, I'm going to just keep doing what I'm doing. But the anti-inflammatory I was using to help recover from the training was also serving as a mild anti-inflammatory for my gastrointestinal problem that had not really become full-blown at the time. So when I took away this anti-inflammatory, it just reared out of control. Now, here's the thing. I'm using this curcumin extract at about 7 to 9 grams a day. A typical bodybuilder takes so much more of what you think works because more is better. And I mean, nobody today would ever take 7 or 9 grams of curcumin. You couldn't, because it was just almost impossible. The 3 or 4 shakes with curcumin in it, just piling this stuff in for recovery from training, but it was taking the edge off this disease. And when I took that compensatory factor away, the disease just flailed out of control. And there I was, hospitalized. So what had happened was, I went in the hospital. They told me, they have to resect my large intestine, cut it out, because that's the only way they would save my life. I said, okay, wait a minute. I need to go back. I'm going to find this stuff I was using. And it took the edge off the disease after going back and using this compound. I was on the corticosteroids as well that the hospital doctors had prescribed, and that took the edge off. After 3 or 4 months, things seemed to be a lot better. I went back to training, but I was limping along. I was never 100%. Because once it hit that hard, it's just hard to recover from the inflammatory activity. But I went on to win Mr. North America a year later and did my thing. And I said, okay, I did it. I got to the goal. Now I have to figure out what the heck is wrong with me. And what I had done was I was supposed to go do my post-grad right after finishing my undergrad in experimental medicine. And I said, I need to start a company that generates the revenue I need to do this research. So I started a sports nutrition company called Champion's Choice and leveraged the Mr. North America Championship, my education.
I remember the brand. I didn't know that was you.
That was me, yeah.
Because I made a bodybuilder at the same time.
Yeah, so that was from Canada.
You didn't know that was him?
I didn't know.
Champion's Choice. So, and that was the first company to ever offer a curcumin-based recovery agent in the marketplace. And what I had done was engineered this compound because I had enough insight knowing which material that I was buying that was working better for me versus materials that weren't working for me to relieve, to take the edge off the disease. Never completely recovered the disease, just taking the edge off. And because I began to market this product, I had to determine with certificates of analysis the actual composition of this curcumin that was coming in to make sure it met specifications. I began to realize that the product that actually had a slightly higher curcumin 3 content. Now, regular curcumin has 3 curcuminoids in it. Most of us go out and buy curcumin 95% and say, yep, it's 95, it's pure, it's going to deliver a result that any other 95% curcumin is going to deliver. But what we don't know until you go in deeper is that there are 3 curcuminoids that make up that 95% curcumin. And they fluctuate from batch to batch, from geographical area that grows it to another geographical area that grows it. In fact, I can buy turmeric that comes from China, from India, and from other South American countries, and all of them have different proportions of these curcuminoids because the climate, the earth, the environment, even the insects, because a lot of these curcuminoids are made by the plant to protect itself from the environment, from oxidation, from insect attack. Now, what's happening when an insect attacks the plant and you begin to analyze this archaic biological system that we still have in our cells that we can affect in a similar way, except the dose that the insect is getting in the plant is going to kill it. But for us, it's serving medicinally and a high dose enough that proportionally is heavy enough to the insect's dose, it could kill us too. Nevertheless, I go back in and realize that the curcumin 3 loaded product would deliver a result that would take the edge off the disease, and I began to focus on curcumin 3. So I isolated it, took it out.
Right.